Hi, Edward Funk, and this is podcast number 65, titled The Nurse Tries to Blackmail Loretta Young. Um, this material is coming from the book Behind the Door, The Real Story of Loretta Young. It's a paper book, it's an audiobook, it's an ebook, um, and really buy the book because I'm only going through this with just highlights. There's so much more to the story that you'd find if you really bought the book and read it. Okay, so here we go. Here are more of Loretta Young's sister Polly Ann's memories regarding Judy's secret birth in a house in Venice, California. So here's Polly Ann talking. For a few weeks, Loretta, the nurse, and Judy all stayed in the house in Venice. I would bring things during the day, groceries and such, and my fiance, Carter, would bring whatever they needed in the evenings. One afternoon, I was coming home alone. There was no one else on the street. Venice Avenue was a quiet two-lane road in those days. But then I stopped at a light and recognized a reporter. I don't remember his name, but I can still remember seeing him that day. He had a pale complexion, and there was another man in the car with him. I think maybe he worked for the Hollywood Reporter. I thought, oh my word, what's he doing down here? That's the only time I actually saw him, but I figured from that they must have tried other ways of following us, either Mom or one of us, so I kept my visits to a minimum. In a preemptive move to foil any curious reporters closing in on the Venice house, Gladys, the mother, had already rented a little home in Westwood. The nurse was dismissed, and Parceda, the maid from the Sunset House, moved in to care for Judy. Polly Ann recalled, I can picture that little house. It was on an incline, and I can see Parceda holding the baby. She was so loving and caring, and she was wonderful with Judy. Loretta went to see Judy every day, even after she went back to work. Herman, her driver, would take her to that little house on the way to the studio, and again on the way home. Studio wasn't that far away, so that she could spend time with the baby. I know that Loretta was concerned about what the neighbors were thinking, but she went ahead anyway. That's one reason why I didn't stop too often. I didn't want too many of us seen in that neighborhood. Remember, at this time, this was still news and scandalous. I did not want to lead any newsmen to Judy. And also what Polly Ann's not saying is that not only would Loretta be recognizable, but both Polly Ann and Sally also leading ladies in films, not quite of the caliber Loretta was doing, but they would all be recognizable. So Sally first saw Judy in the Westwood house. Sally recalled, I remember taking an odd route to get there. My mother didn't approve that I was going at all because of all the secrecy, but I was dying to see the baby. She was very big by this time, probably 6 months old. I loved holding her. I loved her looks and kept saying, oh, Loretta, I hope I have a baby that looks just like this. In response to my enthusiasm about Judy, Loretta referred to Gable's visit earlier that week, the first time he had seen his daughter. And Loretta said, yes, and you know, after all that has been going on, all that we've gone through, instead of having any interest in his daughter, he tried to knock me down on the bed. Hold on. Can you imagine that, Sally? That bastard. Who the hell does he think he is? And I thought, with all that's happened, she thinks he's a bastard. How awful all this must have been for her. Made it twice as bad, as far as I'm concerned. He really was insensitive. He didn't understand that Loretta was a human being that had suffered very much. Gable did not contribute to Judy's care. Polly Ann explained, Loretta didn't need Clark Gable's money to take care of Judy. Matter of fact, she told him not to get involved in that way. Mom thought she was making a mistake. Loretta said, "No, it's finished, and there's nothing more. I don't want to have anything to do with that, Mom." Mom said, "Well, I'm just thinking of the child's sake in case anything happens to you." Loretta was right, as it turns out. And that's Pollyanna's uh, summary. Okay. Loretta continued her schedule of spending early morning and early evenings with Judy, making movies during the day, and being seen in the right places at night to affirm her status as a young actress with a busy social life. She could carry this off because she was surrounded by people absolutely loyal to her. Sally had been so close-mouthed that she hadn't even told her new husband and wouldn't for several years. Okay. Here we go. A turncoat threatened to crack the wall wide open, Pollyanna recalled. The nurse Frenchie had gone to Parcetta, saying that the two of them could blackmail Loretta for a great deal of money. Parcetta absolutely refused and came to Mom and told her. Apparently, the nurse felt that she needed someone to collaborate and had also approached Dr. Holleran. Imagine Frenchie going to him with such a proposition. He worked at Queen of Angels Hospital, and she was on the staff there. His response to her was, "As long as I work here, I don't want you ever on in any of my cases." The situation now is getting too hot for Gladys and Loretta to manage in a town full of reporters. Gladys decided to relocate Judy out of town for several months and place her under the care of the Daughters of Charity that ran the St. Elizabeth Orphanage in San Francisco. Now, from all appearances, there wasn't a baby in Loretta's life, and that rumor mill ground down for the time being. Ramona, this is a movie to be, was on hold when she reported back to the studio in January 1936. While Loretta had been away, it was decided that Ramona would be the studio's first feature-length Technicolor production. The Call of the Wild proved to be a bonanza at the box office, and Zanuck wasn't going to waste any precious time. Loretta would squeeze 2 films while the studio finished preparations for Ramona. The first one, The Unguarded Hour, was a loan out to MGM. The film's trailer began with Loretta Young's back on the screen, more glamorous and stunningly beautiful than ever. The story offered British courtroom intrigue. Perhaps Loretta's best performance on the set came while the cameras weren't rolling. Clark Gable and Spencer Tracy were working on a nearby soundstage, filming San Francisco, and they surprised Loretta by arriving on the set together. Loretta acted like she couldn't have been more flattered that MGM's 2 biggest male stars would come to see her. Under her smile, she thought differently. She reflected, "I thought how different these 2 men were." Clark, who was still married to Rita, was in a hot romance with Carol Lombard. He was like a child, totally unaware of all the difficulty I had been through. As for Spencer, I was afraid to look him in the eyes. Would they show love? Would they show hurt? I didn't have to look to know that they'd show both. All I could do was go home that night and block it out of my mind. Okay. Private Number, the next movie, was the story of a maid who falls in love with the young man of the household. Robert Taylor played the male lead. There was a scene in the movie that eerily reflected Loretta's reality. 2/3 into the picture, Loretta's character is hiding out in a farmhouse with her secret baby, along with her girlfriend, played by Patsy Kelly. She had covertly married the rich son of the household. Now, 2 gruff-looking men came to the door to serve Loretta a legal paper. Loretta opens the envelope, looks at its content, and silently falls back on a chair. Patsy Kelly takes the letter, reads it, and exclaims, "Oh, Ellen, If they annul your marriage on account of fraud, do you know what that makes your baby? Loretta responds, crazy. They couldn't do that. They wouldn't do that. Now, in 1936, the word bastard was too harsh to be spoken on the screen, but audiences would have no problem understanding the horrible dilemma the young mother was facing. Most likely, the day that Loretta was shooting that scene at 20th Century Fox, on her way to the studio that morning, she had stopped by to see her own hidden baby, ensconced in a bungalow less than a mile away. A baby the world would have marked as a bastard if her origins were known. Now, by June 1937, it was decided that the rumors had died down enough to attempt a daring coup of bringing Judy into Loretta's home as her adopted daughter. Polly Ann recalled, I know that when Loretta and Mom were trying to figure out the publicity to adopt a child, they came up with the idea to adopt two children. They asked Dr. Halloran if he thought it was a good idea. Mom didn't really think that actually adopting another child was a good idea, but maybe if they said though, they could just borrow a child for a couple of months. Dr. Halloran said, oh, well, you can borrow my youngest, which was so sweet of him. But then he went home and his wife vetoed the idea. Plan B went into effect. Gossip columnist Luella Parsons reported that Loretta had adopted two children, one child, June, age 3, and the other, Judy, age 23 and a half months. Another source reported Loretta had adopted a 3-year-old boy and a 23 and a half month little girl named Judy. 20th Century Fox publicity department issued a release that appeared to clarify the situation. It stated that Loretta had attempted to adopt two little girls, June, age 3, and Judy, age 23 and a half months. But then it went on to explain that an aunt of the girl's natural family decided to adopt June. Judy, in actuality, was 19 months old, but they stated 23 and a half months to throw anyone off who was counting the months since Call of the Wild began shooting. Loretta Young's sister Sally recalled the days after Loretta adopted her own biological daughter. She stated, Judy was Loretta's daughter, period, and she never thought about putting Judy up for adoption. I don't think any of us gave it a thought. We had a big family to welcome Judy, and Loretta knew that everyone would love Judy, and we did. She was a darling little child. However, in speaking to me, Loretta contradicted Sally's assertion regarding adoption. She said, adoption wasn't an option because Clark's and my legal name would have to appear on the papers. Otherwise, Mom and I would have stayed in Europe and had the baby there. Of course, those thoughts are all changed once Judy was born. She was adorable, and I wanted her. Polly Ann and Carter Herman married in February 1936. She continued to work, grinding out low-budget pictures. Carter's parents had been charter members of the exclusive Los Angeles Country Club, but now Carter were asked to resign because of his marriage to an actress. Now, I'm kind of departing from my script here, but when Randolph Scott applied to the Los Angeles Country Club, they told him that he would not be accepted because he was an actor. And he replied, an actor? Have you ever seen any of my movies? And apparently they had a good enough sense of humor that he was allowed to join. Okay, now back to what we're talking here. Now, because of the morals clause in her contract, Loretta would have definitely lost her career if it became known she had had a baby out of wedlock. But thanks to Gladys's maneuvering, Loretta was able to give birth in secret and keep the baby. A note here. Some accounts of how Loretta was able to have a secret baby is credited to Eddie Mannix, a big shot at Gable's home studio at MGM, and he was known as the Fixer, but really he had nothing to do with it. This was all Gladys's managing. Loretta's career steamed forward, and with her romantic nature there would soon be a new man in his life, in her life. His name was Tyrone Power. So we'll learn more about that in podcast 66. Thanks.